In the middle of Sweden, there is a quiet dynasty that controls industries worth billions and shapes far more of the world than most people realize. Yet, you have probably never heard the name. Across 6 generations, the Wallenberg family turned invisibility into a weapon. They expanded their money and reach from the shadows while staying off the radar. They helped pull thousands of people out of Nazi Germany, yet at the same time, they also worked with Nazi Germany and handled money for them. As wars raged and governments changed, while other players were just trying to survive, the Wallenbergs only became stronger. That is how they became one of Europe's most powerful and discreet families. From AstraZeneca to Ericsson and other Nasdaq companies, their reach cuts through industries that touch almost every part of daily life. But you will not see them showing off yachts, diamonds, or tabloid lifestyles, and you almost never see their last name on rich lists. This is deliberate. The Wallenbergs perfected the trick of staying unseen by using a web of foundations that keeps their wealth hidden. That raises questions. How can one family hold so much influence without being noticed? How did 6 related men build a structure that quietly steers the modern world? And who are they really? The Wallenbergs are fascinating, but their rise was built on secrecy, betrayal, and choices that stunned even relatives. The story starts with André Oskar Wallenberg in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He is the one who set the stage for everything that followed. When people think about Sweden today, they picture a strong economy and a country famous for innovation. But if you rewind to the middle of the 1800s, Sweden did not look like that. The country had raw potential, but money was painfully scarce. You could say the problem was simple. There were big ideas, but almost no way to fund them. Then came a young naval officer named André Oskar Wallenberg. He had just come back from the United States, convinced Sweden could change. What lit that fire in him was a book about how to start a bank. That book sparked an idea, and in 1856 he founded Stockholms Enskilda Banken, Sweden's first private bank. I apologize for my pronunciation. Before SEB, if you wanted a loan in Stockholm, you basically had one option, the central bank. There was no competition or creative financing, not a great setup for growth. André's thinking broke that pattern. He wanted to pool the small savings of regular people and then use that money to kickstart business activity across the country. He borrowed the concept from a model he had seen in Scotland. The logic was simple. Get capital circulating, and Sweden would grow. Could one bank really change a whole country? The answer did not come from André alone. He needed someone willing to scale the vision and absorb the risk. That person was his son, Knut Agathon Wallenberg. Knut joined SEB and pushed the family idea into international waters. He refused to keep the bank local. He pushed it abroad, and in little time, the bank built serious wealth. The real turning point came when a new law restricted how many industrial shares banks were allowed to hold. The family did not back down. Instead, in 1916, they created a holding company called Investor AB. That single move locked in the structure that would define the dynasty and cemented their long-term role in Sweden's economic life. That is also how SEB went global under Knut's influence. But Knut and his wife Alice were not interested in simply enjoying their fortune. They had larger plans for Sweden itself. They had no children, so instead of passing their money down privately, they poured it into national development. They funded projects throughout Stockholm, including the building of the Saltsjöbaden area, and they were thinking long-term. In 1917, they created the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation, aimed at advancing research, science, technology, and medicine. Through that step, their influence spread far beyond banking. That was not Knut's only arena. He also became deeply active in Swedish politics. He served as Sweden's Minister for Foreign Affairs from 1914 to 1917. Once he took on that role, responsibility for the core family business shifted to his half-brother, Marcus Wallenberg Sr. Marcus did not care about putting wealth on display. He lived with an almost obsessive urge to build. He worked like a machine, and luxuries meant nothing to him. He was known for wearing jackets without pockets and then turning them inside out when the fabric wore thin. For Marcus, every resource had to be pushed back into the companies. His empire was all that mattered, and it consumed him. He involved himself in major industrial players, AIA, which is now ABB, Norsk Hydro, Atlas Diesel, which later became Atlas Copco, Stora Kopparberg, which is now Stora Enso, and Scania Vabis, which is now part of Volkswagen. He helped steer several of these giants through their hardest periods. After World War I, the world was chaotic. In that chaos, Marcus became one of Europe's main negotiators and arbitrators. But just when he thought the future was his, he hit a wall. He assumed that Canute would leave everything to him. It made sense from his point of view. Marcus was the one who had worked non-stop to expand the family's fortune. But Canute did something no one expected. Before he died, he placed his entire fortune into a foundation. At first, Marcus felt betrayed. He thought he had been cut out. What he did not yet see was that this move was actually the family's greatest stroke of luck. Without the foundation, the Wallenberg money would have been split, diluted, and slowly lost among multiple heirs. It would have faded with time. The foundation prevented that. It kept the wealth concentrated, focused, and protected for the long term. But even with the treasure secured, the Wallenbergs' biggest test had not arrived yet. It was waiting in one of history's darkest chapters. As the world braced for a second global war, Marcus's legacy would pass to his two sons, Jacob Wallenberg and Marcus Dode Wallenberg Jr. They were about to step into roles that would shape the future of the entire dynasty. Jacob Wallenberg is the figure who truly carried the name forward. He inherited enormous responsibility. In 1918, he joined SEB, the same first private bank founded by André in 1856. He rose fast. By 1920, he was vice CEO. By 1927, he became CEO, a job he held for 19 years. Under him, the bank survived the Great Depression and stayed steady as war approached. But he had no idea how deeply the family would soon be pulled into the conflict. Outside Sweden, tension was rising fast. Sweden stayed officially neutral, but the Wallenbergs were playing a dangerous double game. They did business with both sides, the Allies and the Axis. Jacob became one of Sweden's main trade representatives to Nazi Germany. His younger brother Dode worked with the Allied side. On paper, Sweden was neutral. Behind the scenes, the Wallenbergs were negotiating with everyone. And it went deeper. Their link to Nazi Germany was not only trade. SEB was one of the neutral institutions that cooperated with Nazi Germany and, according to later allegations, helped move and protect assets looted from occupied territories, including property taken from Jewish victims. In plain terms, SEB was part of a dark chapter in which financial channels helped fuel both sides of the war. In many ways, Jacob became Sweden's main point of contact for dealing with Germany. He managed exchanges of goods between the two countries. From the outside, it looked like a neutral position. Underneath, it was anything but simple. As the war went on, the Wallenbergs' involvement drew attention. What began as a strategy for survival turned into a serious controversy. The line between neutrality and complicity kept getting thinner. The family's role in the war became harder to ignore. At the same time, something else was happening that seems almost contradictory. While they were doing business with the Nazis, the Wallenbergs were also secretly helping plot the downfall of Hitler. It was a high-risk move. They were balancing survival, loyalty, and morality in real time. The main force inside Germany trying to overthrow the Nazi regime was a resistance network sometimes referred to here as Black and Gourd. The mission was straightforward: carry out a coup and seize control of the government. But they could not pull that off alone. They needed help from outside Germany, especially from Britain and the United States. That is where the Wallenbergs came in. The brothers acted as secret channels, passing messages between the German resistance and the Allied powers. Jacob Wallenberg even met with German resistance leader Karl Goerdeler in 1943. That meeting turned out to be their last. It was also Jacob's final trip to Berlin during the war, because his involvement with the resistance had been exposed. Going back would likely have meant death. Then came July 1944. The resistance launched its boldest plan, the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. Jacob Wallenberg was asked to meet a messenger in Stockholm to receive word that the coup had succeeded, but the plan failed. The bomb exploded, but Hitler survived. The courier was arrested, jailed, and executed. Goerdeler, the resistance leader Jacob had spoken with, was also executed soon after. While Jacob was wrapped up in secret talks and resistance channels, his nephew Raoul Wallenberg was on a completely different mission. Like his uncle, Raoul was intelligent, resourceful, and unafraid to take risks. In 1944, as Hungary's Jewish population became the Nazis' next target, Raoul was given an extraordinary assignment: go to Budapest and intervene. At that moment, roughly 700,000 Jews in Hungary were being deported to extermination camps, and Raoul's job was to stop that machine. Once he arrived in Nazi-controlled Budapest, he used every possible tactic. He forged protective passports that identified Jewish individuals as being under Swedish protection. He physically pulled thousands of people off Nazi death trains. He intercepted forced death marches and rescued people in broad daylight. In the final days of the war, the Nazis prepared to wipe out the 70,000 Jews still trapped in the central ghetto of Budapest. Raoul stepped in. He negotiated, he threatened, and incredibly, he stopped the massacre. His actions saved thousands. The Wallenbergs came out of Europe's darkest moment even more powerful than before. But as the dust settled, the careful image around the family began to crack. When American troops pushed into Germany, they uncovered documents in places like Stuttgart that would haunt the Wallenberg legacy for decades. Those papers showed that SEB, the Wallenberg Bank, had created a dummy setup with Bosch, a major German company. The purpose was to help hide Nazi assets. The discovery hit like a bomb. In 1945, officials in the United States Treasury blacklisted the Wallenberg brothers, labeling them special blocked nationals. That status is basically the financial version of being put in a penalty box, except this time the stakes were global trust. Back in Sweden, people started asking what else the family had been hiding. Their reputation was damaged, their prestige had been blown apart, and while that scandal was spreading, something even more painful and personal was happening. Raoul Wallenberg, the young diplomat who had risked his life to save people from Nazi murder, was seized by the Soviets. In 1945, when Soviet forces entered Budapest, Raoul was taken into custody. They accused him of being a spy, and then he vanished. For years, the Soviet Union denied knowing anything about him. Much later, they claimed he died of a heart attack in 1947, at age 35. The truth has never been confirmed. Meanwhile, the Wallenbergs focused on repairing their influence and rebuilding their standing on the world stage. After the war, they were eager to restore business links. Even, surprisingly, with the Soviet Union, they planned a loan to Stalin's government worth $250 million. That raises difficult questions. Could the Wallenberg family have used that leverage to push for Raoul's release? Or was it a calculated choice to protect business over confronting the Soviets about him? We do not know. We can only speculate. The Swedish government did not do much either. When it came to Raoul, it remained silent. It is a tragic, frustrating situation. A man who saved thousands was left on his own by the very people who could have helped him. During this period, Jacob considered stepping aside. He had guided the bank through crisis after crisis and helped build an empire. In 1946, he resigned as CEO. That moment closed an era, and the baton passed to his younger brother, Marcus Dodd Wallenberg. Dodd was about to take over one of Sweden's most influential financial institutions, and he was not planning to simply coast. He had a mission. He took a hands-on role in reshaping the Wallenberg empire. He turned Atlas Diesel into Atlas Copco. He played a key role in developing Sweden's Saab fighter jets. He managed delicate trade arrangements during the war and in the tense years that followed. For roughly 50 years, from the 1930s until his death in 1982, Marcus Doddy Wallenberg sat at the center of almost every major decision. But that power came with enormous pressure. The weight of carrying the family legacy was heavy, and time was not kind to his health. Marcus had two sons, Mark Wallenberg Jr. and Peter Wallenberg. Between them, Mark was the one expected to inherit control. He had been prepared for that future from a very young age. His schooling, his career path, everything was arranged around one job: continue the dynasty. He worked to merge two major Swedish banks, Skandinaviska Banken and SEB, creating the modern form of SEB that exists today. The pressure on him was intense. Everyone assumed he would succeed. Then, in 1971, the unthinkable happened. At just 47 years old, Mark Wallenberg took his own life. It was devastating, and it left a deep hole in both the family and the business. So much was riding on Mark. He was supposed to carry the legacy and lead the empire. Mark's death left a vacuum. His brother Peter had mostly stayed out of the spotlight, but suddenly he was the one in the hot seat. Peter had taken a very different path from what the family usually expected. He did not start at the top of the dynasty. Instead, he began at ground level, working for Atlas Copco in Africa. He climbed step by step and built his own track record. His relationship with his father had been strained, and he knew he would have to prove himself. After Mark's death, Peter's life changed direction. The family needed leadership. Even though he had not been the chosen heir, he stepped forward and accepted the responsibility, despite the doubts around him. When his father died in 1982, Peter officially became head of the family business. Many still did not believe he was the right choice, but Peter was determined to prove otherwise. Over the years, he did more than simply keep the machine running. He pushed it onto a global level. He forced through major restructurings. He even managed to buy back shares in Atlas Copco and Stora Kopparberg from Volvo, which locked in the family's position in those companies. He accomplished this by launching Patricia Industries, which later became a crucial arm of their investment company, Investor AB. And that was only the start of Peter's lasting impact. So, where does the Wallenberg family stand now? If you thought their influence was already huge, the modern scale is even more extreme. Today the empire is run by the fifth generation, brothers Jacob Wallenberg and Peter Wallenberg Jr., and their cousin Marcus Wallenberg. The numbers are staggering. According to the Financial Times, the Wallenberg business empire is valued at about 250 billion euros. To give a sense of scale, that puts them in the same league as figures like Elon Musk in terms of financial power. But unlike Elon Musk, you almost never hear about the Wallenbergs in the news. That is because most of their wealth is deliberately hidden. Much of the empire sits inside foundations. This structure helps them avoid inheritance taxes and guarantees that nobody in the family can simply drain the funds for private spending. This is not some minor detail. Those foundations control more than $30 billion in assets. They also hold major stakes in publicly listed companies, which, combined, are worth more than $660 billion. That is why you will not see Wallenberg on Sweden's rich lists. The wealth is real, but it is locked inside those structures and managed for the dynasty, not flashed by individuals. The family's grip on Sweden's economy is unmatched in Europe. The historian Gunnar Wetterberg, who has written extensively about the Wallenberg rise, puts it plainly. Every Swedish government, left or right, knows it has to work with the Wallenberg family because that is viewed as what is best for Sweden. What separates the Wallenbergs is not only that they built massive wealth, it is that they preserved it through multiple generations. There is an old idea called the curse of the third generation. It says the founders build the fortune, their children hold it together, and then by the time it reaches the grandchildren, it falls apart. That did not happen here. Jacob, Marcus, and Peter, now in their late 60s, are still running the empire. They have already laid the groundwork so the sixth generation can take over when the time is right. Handing down money is one thing. Handing down values is something else. And that is where the Wallenbergs stand apart. They do not chase publicity. They focus on running their companies well, and it shows. They live by a family motto in Latin that means to be and not to seem. They are not out there trying to look important. They rarely give interviews, and when they do, the topic is their businesses, their institutions, or their philanthropy. They keep their personal views and politics out of public sight. Still, their influence is completely real. They are often described as kingmakers by outlets like the Financial Times. Another publication has called them the best-paid charity workers in the world. The blend of power and philanthropy makes them almost untouchable. Because if you move against the Wallenbergs, you are not just targeting a rich family, you are, in effect, targeting Sweden. And almost no one is willing to do that. After everything laid out here, the Wallenberg story forces a pause. They are one of the most powerful families on Earth. They built an empire worth billions, yet they stay mostly in the background and have mastered the transfer of wealth across generations without letting it disappear. Through wars, economic crashes, and very dark moments, they held on to both money and influence. They managed to remain largely unseen while exercising control in companies like Ericsson, AstraZeneca, and Saab. And even with that level of influence, they have stayed off the usual rich lists. They keep to themselves, stay out of the spotlight, and use structures like foundations to keep the fortune inside the dynasty. At the same time, their past is not clean. They are brilliant financiers, but their legacy also carries a shadow, cooperation with Nazi Germany, and a willingness to look away if it protected business. In the end, one thing is obvious. The Wallenbergs are still masters of discretion. Now, please subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and drop a $sign in the comments to show that you made it to the end. Also, check out the video I made about the Rockefellers. I think you will really enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.